بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم والحمد لله رب العالمين اللهم صل وسلم وبارك على نبينا وحبيبنا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه أجمعين وبعد. So today, inshallah ta'ala, is the final session of the Hadith course, the primary Hadith course. This is the first part. The second part is given by Sheikh Ziyad al-Qaisi. He has it's both in English and in Arabic, both from the Hadith number 22 to Hadith number 42. So in order for you to get the full credit for the primary Hadith course, you have to actually attend both courses, both parts. This one that we're concluding today, and Sheikh Ziyad's part, he has done them previously both in Arabic and English, and they're recorded so you can attend them online. And he'll probably repeat them again, as I will this one in the future. So you can just keep your eyes and ears peeled whenever he gives it live. You're welcome to attend it live, or you can attend it online, inshallah, starting next semester. So we have 3 hadith. So today I'm going to try and move as I don't want to say on a jog through them, but I do need, since there's three of them, to be a little bit quicker in terms of how fast I'll move within these hadith. Hopefully, inshallah, so far you found this course beneficial to you. The point of us running these courses really is to help bring the disciplines of Islamic knowledge closer to people, allow you to actually perform talab ilm, where you actually go and seek knowledge in a setting that is suitable for you, suitable for your time, suitable for the time of your life that you're in, and allow you to kind of slowly add to your Islamic knowledge base as we go along. And give you access to it in a way where it's not always just a public course where we just sit and talk, but rather there's assignments, there's an exam at the end, there's some assessments, so you get to see how you're learning and how you're doing, and then build on that knowledge as we move along. So that's kind of the point of all of this, is to encourage talab al-ilm and to allow people who actually want to learn to have access to the knowledge that exists. Within our community, we have a lot of, IDA right now has 7 to 8 courses that run per semester. And there's 5 or 6 of us teachers or faculty that are a part of the academy. Alhamdulillah, it's a growing effort. So we have 3 hadith, 19, 20, and 21, and we'll try inshallah get through all 3 of them bi'idhnillahi ta'ala today. This is the longest hadith within this collection, wallahu alam. Maybe an exception of Hadith Jibreel. It's a long hadith, which is, I should have thought about this when I concluded all 3. But it's something that people have heard before, so it's not too difficult, inshallah, to explain. So I'll read it in Arabic, inshallah, then I'll attempt to explain it. فيروي الإمام الترمذي في جامعه بسند صحيح عن عبد الله بن عباس رضي الله عنهما قال: كنت خلف رسول الله صلى الله عليه وآله وسلم يوما فقال: يا غلام إني أعلمك كلمات احفظ الله يحفظك احفظ الله تجده تجاهك إذا سألت فاسأل الله وإذا استعنت فاستعن بالله واعلم أن الأمة لو اجتمعت على أن ينفعوك بشيء لم ينفعوك إلا بشيء قد كتبه الله لك وإن اجتمعوا على أن يضروك بشيء لم يضروك إلا بشيء قد كتبه الله عليك رفعت الأقلام وجفت الصحف. وفي رواية غير الترمذي قال: احفظ الله تجده أمامك تعرف إلى الله في الرخاء يعرفك في الشدة واعلم أن ما أخطأك لم يكن ليصيبك وما أصابك لم يكن ليخطئك واعلم أن النصر مع الصبر وأن الفرج مع الكرب وأن مع العسر يسرا. So this is a hadith that has a number of narrations. It's a famous hadith, and it's narrated in different ways. And really, when you see the different narrations, you learn how hadith were transmitted. All of these ahadith, with their different narrations, are read to us through Abdullah ibn Abbas. And all of them start with the same basic idea, that he got behind the Prophet ﷺ and he told him things. And when you read these differences, you know that the differences come from the memories of the people who are transmitting. Meaning it's coming from the strength of the memories, whatever it is that they could remember. So the differences in words, or the extra piece in one extra piece or different piece in the other, or the different wording, it's based on how the Sahaba or the Tabi'een that came after them, or the Tabi'een memorized this hadith from Abdullah ibn Abbas and what they remembered from him. And maybe what Abdullah ibn Abbas remembered every time he narrated it, because sometimes you remember one piece that was said and then you forget it the next time. And that the Sahaba, when they narrated the hadith of the Prophet ﷺ, they would narrate it based on how they understood what he said ﷺ. Meaning they didn't necessarily memorize word for word. It wasn't always verbatim. The Quran was. And here's the difference. The Quran was verbatim, it was word for word, down to the waw and the fa and to every detail. The hadith of the Prophet ﷺ, what he said ﷺ, it's like you lived with him. If you lived with him, would you not consider memorizing or remembering certain things he told you, or certain things he did? Of course you would. He's the Prophet ﷺ. You would put in that effort to know, remember certain things that he said or did. So they did. They put that effort in. But their human part would also be there too. I mean, they would forget, they would paraphrase, and that's okay. That doesn't mean that the hadith is not authentic. It just means that when you study his hadith, you have to know that this is the paraphrasing of the Sahaba, or how they understood it. And sometimes maybe the narrator that came after the Sahabi in paraphrasing. It doesn't take away from the authenticity. It just makes sure that when we're reading this, what we're reading is not exactly what he said verbatim. There may be a small variation in what's being said, and that's all right. That doesn't take away, because the authenticity of what he says is actually based on the meanings that exist with these hadith more than the actual wordings. Sometimes the wording do have significance, and that's determined by the scholars of hadith based on the narration itself and how it was transmitted and how long it was. The shorter the hadith, the more comfortable you are with the actual wording of it. The longer the hadith, the more likelihood that the Sahabi who is telling it is basing it on how he remembers or what he was remembering when the Prophet ﷺ saying. I'll show you an example right now. So this is obviously an extremely famous hadith, and very important, and it's a full aqeedah hadith, and basically the whole aqeedah course that I run is one way or the other dependent on the meanings of this hadith, especially when you talk about qada and qadr, which is the backbone of understanding our Islamic creed and Islamic theology for sure. So he says, radiallahu anhu, kuntu khalfa Rasulillah sallallahu alayhi wa sallam yawman, I was behind him, meaning I was sitting behind him on an animal of some sort, a donkey or a horse or something. فقال, so he said, Ya ghulam, oh boy, or a kid. And ghulam is a young boy, basically. So, oh ghulam, meaning, oh young boy. Inni u'allimuka kalimat, I'm going to teach you words. Kalimat is, when you translate it, translates into a word. But that's not really what it means. It's really phrases, or sentences, or concepts. That's what kalima actually means. If you lived in the Middle East, you'll find someone will stand up and say, "Wal'an ma'a kalimatin li fadilat al-shaykh," whatever. So we'll say kalima. Kalima is a word. Never has a sheikh picked up a microphone and said a word, ever. In the history of shuyukh, in the history of never have they said one word and sat down. So it's always going to be a nice long 30, 40, 50-minute prolonged, convoluted talk that he's going to give you. But the word kalima is really not meant to be a word. It means a piece of information. Yeah? It's something, it's a tangible piece of information that you can understand, that is comprehensible. That is when it's used when it's used in a social setting regarding education. When we're talking in grammar, kalima becomes a word. So kalima is a word in grammar. And this is where terminology becomes really important, and nomenclature becomes very, very important to understand. Because the same word, like I pointed out to you, if you remember a couple of lessons ago, I said the word sunnah. The word sunnah has like at least 4 meanings. It depends on who's using it and why they're using it. So if you don't understand what the word is being used for, you can be very, very confused. And you're going to make mistakes later on and based on what you heard. So you have to make sure that when you're listening to someone speak about something within any scientific discipline or any Islamic discipline, that you know what terminology they're using and what they mean by the words that they're coining, or the phrases that they are using. So here's the same thing. The word kalimat does not mean words, it means pieces of information. So he gave him alayhi salatu wasalam in sentences. Each sentence had a concept in it that's worth of a couple of lectures, honestly, but we'll try and quickly explain it. Ihfadhillaha yahfadhka. So ihfadh, how do you so hifdh is what did they say here? Be mindful, or what did they say? Okay, be mindful. Very good. So hifdh is memorization, or the protection of something. So ihfadhillah, you can't really memorize or necessarily protect, but literally speaking. So it has to, you have to understand this phrase figuratively. There's no other way for it to be. You cannot understand it literally. You have to understand it figuratively. So what does ihfadh in a figurative sense mean? So ihfadhillah means protect Allah in terms of the status that He has in your heart. That's what ihfadhillah means. Meaning, He does not need protection, subhanahu wa ta'ala, but the status that He has in your heart does. Where Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala resides inside of your heart, meaning in terms of your priorities, in terms of how you view Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, the magnification and the exaltation that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is worthy of, that exists inside of you, and that needs to be preserved. So when you preserve the status of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala inside of you, that is what he's talking about. Ihfadhillah, meaning make sure that you continuously are reminded of Allah. You're reminded of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala when you make decisions. Isn't that what taqwa was? That's the hadith of last time. That's what taqwa is. Taqwa is that question, always asking yourself that question. Before I do, is this going to cause me to be punished? Is this going to bring upon myself the wrath of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala because of this choice? So ihfadhillah is basically exactly that you're being mindful of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala before you say or do anything. احفظ الله يحفظك. This is jawab al-talab. So in Arabic, you can see there's a sukoon over the dha here. So it's not يحفظك, it's يحفظك. So and the reason is because it's an answer for a command. احفظ الله, meaning what it means is that if you do that, so be mindful of Allah inside of your heart, or be aware, be preservant of His status. And if you do that, يحفظك, then He will do the same for you. He will protect your status, and you will continuously be watched over as well and cared for. So that if piece is implied in the sentence. You don't need to actually, in English you have to say it, in Arabic you don't have to. So preserve the status of Allah in your heart, and if you do so, then He will do the same for you. Will not, and we have a hadith that are similar to that, where He says, alayhi salatu wasalam, يقول الله أنا مع عبدي إذا ذكرني فإذا ذكرني في نفسه ذكرته في نفسي. I'm with my servant as he invocates me, remembers me. And if he remembers me inside of himself, I remember him inside of myself. So what does Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala self mean? We don't know. This is something that we do not have the ability to comprehend. We cannot describe it. We cannot even philosophically talk about it. There is no usage of discussing it, because it's something that's beyond our ability to comprehend. So we accept it as is. We should understand there's a difference between Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala invocating, remembering someone in a private manner versus Him being remembered in a public manner amongst His creation subhanahu wa ta'ala. We accept it as that. But that's what He's saying here. احفظ الله يحفظك. If you do that, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will do that for you, and there's nothing more valuable. احفظ الله تجده تجاهك. If you be mindful of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, you will find Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Tujahak, meaning tujah is jiha is direction. Tujah is in the direction of. So tujahak, in your direction. احفظ الله, if you continue to be mindful of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and you carry His status in your heart the way it should be carried in your heart, تجده تجاهك. You'll find Him always in your direction. You'll find that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will always help you make sense of things. That's really what this means. It'll help you. What people need in life is really just the ability to make sense of what's happening. That's really all we need. Everything else is just certain differing degrees of entitlement. What we need in life is the ability to make sense of what's occurring. That's all. If you can make sense of what's happening, if you're able to understand what's going on, explain it in a proper way, then you can always move forward. Whether good things are happening to you or bad things are happening to you, if you're able to understand them, I mean you're able to make sense of why they're going on, figure out the next step after they occur, then you'll always be okay. And if you can't do that, it doesn't matter how many good things He throws your way, subhanahu wa ta'ala, you'll just continue to be confused because you won't know what this means. Is this a blessing? Is this a punishment? Is this a trial? What do I do with it? How do I behave? How do I act about? How do I go about acting with it? What do I do about the fact that other people have a different hand altogether? Whether it's better, whether it's worse. It's making sense of all that you need. That's what you need. So in order for you to make sense of all of that, you have to be mindful of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. It's actually not mystic. Meaning, this relationship here is really not something that exists outside the realm of logic and knowledge. No, if you continue to be mindful of Allah, if you understand Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, you continue to study and learn. Being mindful of Allah means that you continuously read His word, you study His knowledge, you follow His way subhanahu wa ta'ala. That will allow you to comprehend. And if you do that, you'll be able to understand and make sense of what's happening around you in the world and what's happening to you as well. Because that is the biggest blessing of all. And that's what the scholars talked about as this meaning. Tajidhu tujahak doesn't just mean that He will take care of you. No, it's beyond that. It's not just that you'll find Him on your side, because that's a figure of speech. What does at your side mean? Tajidhu tujahak. What does that even mean? So this is the concept of it is something much more important. إذا سألت فاسأل الله. If you ask, then ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. وإذا استعنت فاستعن بالله. And if you seek aid, then seek aid in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. وَاعْلَمْ أَنَّ الْأُمَّةَ لَوْ اجْتَمَعَتْ. Of course, this is strengthening the concept of tawheed, right? When you ask Allah first what He means, subhanahu wa ta'ala. You're at your alayhi salatu. You can ask, obviously, other people for things. But the concept is that if you want something, the first one that you should be turning to in terms of the request should be Allah. When you're seeking aid or seeking protection or seeking help, you will seek it from other people, that's fine. But in your heart, you're seeking it from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala through others. But you're seeking it from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. It's going to come through others, but it's from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. That doesn't exist for someone who does not internalize the understanding of who Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is. That's why He kept on using this word, ihfadillah. I mean, it's what Iman is. It's internalizing that concept. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala doesn't exist as a superficial understanding somewhere in the outskirts of your psyche, but rather it's who He is subhanahu wa ta'ala is internalized as a part of your subconsciousness now. It's nice and tucked nice and safe right inside of you, so you understand it. It's always with you. And if you do that, then it's easy. It's easy for you, to understand who Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is. And you'll always turn to Him first because you know that tawfiq, it comes from Allah. And if you need aid, then you'll know always to seek it from Him first, subhanahu wa ta'ala, because you know that it's going to come from Him, even if it happens through other people. And that way you won't be dependent on others. You'll be dependent on Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, but still pragmatic in your life, making decisions that make sense within the vicinity, within the capacity of your surroundings. Because you're not told in this world to live in isolation from everything around you, from your environment and from the people around you, but you're asked in this world to always remember where things originate from, who actually is the source of everything, and who makes the decisions at the end, and who writes the tawfiq, or writes the facilitation or the success of something versus the opposite of it. Is it people or is it Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala? And that is really what internalizing and hifz of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala means in your heart. This is all i'tiqad. Or this is the, as my teacher would say, this is the consequence or the fruit of i'tiqad. So if you have a strong and clear theology, this is the fruit of it. This is what happens. If you truly understand tawheed and you follow tawheed, then this is what will happen. You will ihfadillah. And if you do that, yahfadk, he will preserve you. Tajidhu tujahak, you'll find him always, he's always in your direction. Everything you understand, it makes sense to you what's going on. You'll always turn to Allah first and asking. You'll always turn to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala first and seeking aid. واعلم أن الأمة لو اجتمعت على أن ينفعوك بشيء لم ينفعوك إلا بشيء قد كتبه الله لك وإن اجتمعوا على أن يضروك بشيء لم يضروك إلا بشيء قد كتبه الله عليك. Know that the nation as in humanity, if they came together trying to benefit you with something that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala did not decree that you were going to be benefited through, they have no ability to do so. And vice versa. If they want to harm you with something that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala had not decreed that you're going to be harmed by, then you're not going to be harmed by it. And that is an extremely comforting and important piece. That at the end, whatever occurred to you was in the books by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala from the beginning, good or bad, beautiful or horrific, it was in the books. And knowing that it's in the books means it is regulated, it is watched, it is documented, and there will be salvation, there will be consequences at the end, good or bad for you as a person. And if you are oppressed, then you will find justice. And if you are oppressed, you'll also find justice. And regardless of what occurs, you know that it occurred because Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala had decreed it. It happened through people, happened through dhulm. Someone oppressed you, horrific oppression, it happened. Yeah, this is under Allah's will. It's still Allah's will. No one can go beyond Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala's will. The person chose to do that to you, but it's under Allah's will. And understanding that is key to understanding the world around you. The fact that it happened, it means Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala knew what was going to happen. It was a part of His overarching will subhanahu wa ta'ala. It came through the choices of human beings, and it affected you because Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala allowed it to affect you. And there will be salvation from that yawm al-qiyamah. It will be brought back, and then whatever, if you were oppressed or mistreated, that will be taken care of. It will be ironed out yawm al-qiyamah, and you'll get back whatever it is that was taken away from you, and you'll be treated fairly, if not beyond fairly, on the Day of Judgment. And this is important, because understanding Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala's will, and then under that qada and qadar is important. Someone oppressed me, that's Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala's qada. I didn't do anything to deserve to be oppressed. For the most part, we don't. You're never deserving of oppression. Huh? You're never deserving of oppression. You can be deserving of sweet justice. And the justice could be swift and brutal, but it's justice. You deserve justice. But you never deserve oppression. Even if you oppress someone, you still don't deserve oppression. You deserve justice. Is that the difference here? It's very important. You never deserve oppression. So if you're oppressed, you didn't deserve that. No? It's qada. It's a part of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala's qada. It's Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala's decree. Within that decree, there'll be good things, there'll be difficult things. It's a part of His will subhanahu wa ta'ala. Within His will are things that are going to be extremely enjoyable and other things that are extremely difficult to comprehend and accept. They all end, and when they end, they are brought back yawm al-qiyamah, and then they're dealt with justly. And that's how this world has always functioned. Islam has never came and said anything different. Meaning the Prophet ﷺ never promised anything aside from that. Right? And understanding Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala's compassion, and understanding Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala's forgiveness, and understanding Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala's love comes through the fact that nature is as brutal as we know it is, and always has been. And it's not news for anybody. And if it is news today, it just means people have been so busy scrolling in TikTok, they haven't read any books of history or any chapter of history that preceded maybe 1965. Not even before that, when in World War II, maybe. There's always brutality throughout history. Brutality exists. It's a part of the decree. The decree is, what is the decree? The decree of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is that nature has pain in it, and it has the possibility of oppression and mistreatment, and some people will use it that way. That's the decree of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. That the potential of pain in this universe exists. It's there. It's a part of this whole story. And some people will choose to use it in a way that is negative and harmful. And they will. And then they'll be held accountable for doing such. And all the questions that come, well, if Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is Rahim, and there is brutality in the universe. And that was a part of this story from the beginning. It wasn't some genius discovery that some atheist came up with. Well, no, he said he was Rahman Rahim, and in the context that nature was extremely brutal. Why? Because these verses were revealed to people who are living in the desert. Most children died in their first couple of weeks of life out of starvation and dehydration. So they understood that it was a very cruel and difficult world to live in. Yet Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Because there's really no way for us to appreciate the goodness in the world if we don't have access to the badness. There is no meaning to the word sweet if you did not have sour. There's no meaning to the word ease if there's no difficulty. The word health means nothing if there's no sickness. If I took a rock and told you this is a healthy rock, what does that mean? What's a healthy rock? Unless I made up some definition on my own of what health for a rock is, it means nothing to this rock because it can't get sick. If it could get sick, then we could call it healthy if it wasn't sick. But if it can't get sick, then the word healthy cannot be applied to it. And we as human beings cannot understand anything if we do not have an opposition. You need, in order to understand something, you have to define it. To simply define it, you have to have an opposite to compare to. And then those two just become the pinball effect, where you just go by the ping pong effect. Just go back and forth. What is hubb is the opposite of hate. What is hate is the opposite of hubb. And then what are they? They're emotion. Well, what is an emotion? It's the opposite of indifference. It's like indifference and emotion. So what's the difference? We cannot comprehend things that don't have opposites. It's impossible. Our brains don't work that way. That's why when there is something that doesn't have an opposite, we stand there for a long time trying to figure it out, and then we come up with something that is similar to an opposite, and then we try to use that as a way for us, as an anchor for us to comprehend something. That's why when Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala talks about himself, he uses terms that are humane. Why? So that we can understand, so we can draw parallels, because if he doesn't, then we don't know exactly how to comprehend anything that he's saying subhanahu wa ta'ala. So that's why this is important. Because when he says this, he's telling you, look, a lot has been decreed already. It's already there. It's going to happen. Good or bad is going to happen as part of this whole story. It'll happen through people. And if you are mistreated or you're oppressed or if you go through difficulty and you persevere, you'll come back and you'll get it exactly. رُفَعَتِ الْأَقْلَامُ وَجَفَتِ الصُّحُفُ. Meaning the pens are now lifted and the ink is now dry. Meaning that's it. There's nothing else after. It's like what he's saying in simple is period, end of sentence, close, end of conversation. We're done. That's it. There's nothing beyond that within this universe. Don't go seeking for answers that don't exist, for questions that cannot be asked, because you cannot comprehend them yet, because it's impossible for us to understand all of this. But we do understand that nothing goes beyond Allah's decree. Because if it did, then he wouldn't have any way to, then it's not his fault. Jalla Jalalullah, obviously. I'm just playing the devil's advocate here in terms of the argument. If you said something was outside of his decree, then he can't be accountable for it. He won't reward you for it. He won't punish you for it. He didn't know about it altogether. And that would be a problem. That would be a big problem in terms of his divineness or his divinity. And then you wouldn't really have a reason to worship. And there would be real panic and chaos. Because then if something is going unaccounted for, then how do we... But no, everything that occurs is accounted for. Everything is under his decree, subhanahu wa ta'ala. Good or bad is going to occur, and you're going to find justice for it, whether it's on your side or against you. And that puts you at ease. Because what scares us the most is that if we go neglected, if it goes unnoticed. The problem with oppression, the real problem of it, is if it goes unnoticed. That's the real problem of it. No, it's a horrible thing in its essence, don't get me wrong. But the essential part, the critical part of oppression that is painful and difficult, is that if it goes unnoticed and there's never justice for it in any form. And that's why Yawm al-Qiyamah exists, and that's why Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala explains these things to us. That live your life, know that good or bad that comes to you, it's all decreed. They can't go be outside the script that's already there, even though they're a part of it as well, just like you and I are. In Riwayat al-Tirmidhi, he just has a little bit of قال احفظ الله تجده أمامك. Be mindful of Allah or preserve the status of Allah in your heart. You'll find Him in front of you. Amamak, again, the same thing, meaning He'll help you make sense of things. You'll always find Him there. You'll never see things outside the lens of seeing it through the understanding of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. You'll always understand it through Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. It won't be through something else where you lose sight of why they happened and where you're going with them. And then he adds to this, obviously a description here that didn't exist in the first one. تعرف إلى الله في الرخاء يعرفك أو يعرفك في الشدة. Know Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in times of ease, and He will know you in times of difficulty. Meaning, show a lot of affinity and adherence to His rule when you have the chance to do so. So when you go through difficulty and it's harder, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala remembers that for you, and He rewards you, and He gives you ease for going through that. And then he adds the same thing. وَاعْلَمْ أَنَّ مَا أَخْطَأَكَ لَمْ يَكُنْ لِيُصِيبَكَ, and know that which did not come your way was never going to come your way to begin with. وَاعْلَمْ أَنَّ مَا أَصَابَكَ لَمْ يَكُنْ لِيُخْطِئَكَ, and what came your way was never going to miss you to begin with. It just puts the heart at ease. That you try your best, work hard, go in the direction that you think is appropriate, plan things out. And then whatever happens was going to happen anyway, so there's no point of... this helps dwelling. People dwell on their past a lot, and people worry about their future too much to the point where they become dysfunctional, or they become too anxious to actually do the job appropriately. And that's not what you're supposed to be as a Muslim. If you continue to dwell on previous mistakes and wonder, if I just didn't do that one mistake, everything would... Look, what happened, happened. It was going to happen. Just move on. Learn the lesson and move on. Just learn what you should have learn the lesson for yourself, for your own sake, what you should have done. And then move on. It happened. It was going to happen. There was no way to stop it. It was a part of the decree of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. It puts that mind and the heart, allows you to move on. And in the future, you try your best. Whatever's going to come is going to come. I can't say it. Imagine if you couldn't. Like if you didn't do that, by the way.